In April last year, the widows of these three men asked the Human Rights Violations Committee to find out what had happened to their husbands since their disappearance in 1985. This week, they got some answers. Former Eastern Cape security policemen Harold Snyman, Hermanus du Plessis, Johan van Zyl, Gideon Nieuwoud, and Gerardus Lotz are asking for amnesty for the murder of the Pepco Three. Vlakplaas operatives Rolf Venter, Gert Bjesseler, Kimpani Mogwai, and Johannes Kole are applying for their abduction.
Sipho Hashe, my husband, was in Robben Island. He was arrested 1963 and came back 1973. And they gave him 5 years pending order or restriction. I don't remember which one is it now. But it was 5 years. He couldn't even go out to the near school there. After my husband get through this, the banning order, Pepco was there. Then after they co-opted him to the Pepco, my husband started, to organize. They used to take a loudspeaker, going up and down in each and every street in Port Elizabeth, telling the people that there is a meeting. Then using also Rio and the other halls.
He was an organizer in the Pepco. He helped the people. Because I remember one time, there is the people who have no place to stay in those shacks far away, like Fair Plus. So they'll take those people to here in the Roman Hall here. And then they'd always cook. We cook soup for those people every day. Then I saw those people, they are going to fetch food in the shops for those people.
And my husband was active in Pepco and active in politics. The Pepco was trying to solve the community problems. And there were a lot of problems at that moment. And he was involved too much in politics. He used to told me about his father. He's fighting for the rights of the people and the oppression in this country. And even him, he's involved about those things.
I think it was 83, if I'm not mistaken. Take 83, 84, 85, Pepco was up. The stadium, then Kaika Stadium, you wouldn't have even a space to walk there if you know then Kaika Stadium, if they called a meeting.
The Port Elizabeth Black Civics Organization, Pepco, was launched in 1979. By the stormy mid-80s, it had become the main force for resistance and street-level organization in the Eastern Cape. Hashe, Godolozi, and Galela were prominent Pepco leaders at the time.
Pepco in the Eastern Cape was the father of the civic movement, and its links and growth thereafter in terms of the civic movement is nationally recognized to be the founder of the civic movement at national level.
We're coming as an alternative force, and then we have to prove to the people that we are indeed an alternative force. And then we had to do it by means of demanding and pressurizing the government.
We're operating above ground. We're as transparent as anything, accounting in public meetings, making public press statements and press conferences. We had exposed every activity that we were engaged in, and you could read without any much effort. Didn't need much brain to realize that this is a mass mobilization. These are civic issues. These are political civic issues, but they are expressed. We were never armed. but we were treated like terrorists.
Port Elizabeth was ungovernable. And I want to go even further and say that Pepco was in control here.
The activists were winning the war, or had already done so. There was feedback from the Secretariat of the State Security Council, which was received by the JMC, and to the effect that the government was insisting that the Eastern Cape be stabilized and that a situation be found, or a solution be found. It was the security branch which had to deal with that primarily. They had to stabilize the situation. And then I had the chance to have a chat to Minister Louis Legrandsie, and as I said earlier, in my submission to them, we discussed the fact that the normal legal methods of policing were no longer effective, and the minister said to me very clearly, Colonel, you have to make a plan with these activists in the Eastern Cape.
Snyman interpreted his conversation with Minister Legrandsie as sanction to eliminate activists. Then Colonel Hermanus du Plessis came to him and said they had run out of legal options to contain militants in the Port Elizabeth area. Du Plessis suggested that the only option was elimination. Snyman did not oppose the idea.
Colonel Snyman did not give a direct instruction, but he did say that he realized that there were no other options, that nothing else would work, and that I had to proceed and do the best I could in the interest of the country. And you interpreted that as being an instruction to go ahead and eliminate. Is that correct? Yes.
The fact that Colonel du Plessis told me that he had discussed it with Colonel Snyman created the impression with me that if it came from Snyman, then it most probably came from an even higher authority.
I spoke to Captain van Zyl. I believe after all the years that it took place in my office, at that stage I also spoke to Captain Nieuwoud and explained to them what the problem was that we were faced with. I can just mention that Mr. Nieuwoud and Mr. van Zyl at that stage were completely aware of the activities of Pepco.
Is
it your evidence that these three people, the so-called Pepco Three, that they were extremely dangerous? That is correct? The purpose, as I can remember, was to remove the three activists from society so that they could no longer participate effectively in organization and be either directly or indirectly responsible for the unrest in the townships.
Even if he had removed some radicals, there were other radical leaders and members of Pepco that were alive at the time, not so?
That is correct.
Is it also not correct
that is correct?
Is it also not correct that Pepco formed a constituent of UDF, which was the umbrella body? There were other radical political organizations like COSAS and COSATU, which had radical members. So eliminating a specific grouping like Pepco leaders would have been inconsequential or futile. Do you agree with me?
No, I don't agree.
I understand why you don't. Because you did not mention that in your application. You said you wanted to regain the initiative. But it's not correct that after the disappearance was made publicly known in the media, there were protests for the release or the revelation of the leaders, resulting in a state of emergency, which you do not mention, in June 1985, 2 months afterwards, or July 1985, 2 months afterwards, because of the pressure that was exerted for the release of the leaders. Is it not correct?
That is correct.
That is correct.
So therefore you grossly miscalculated that the death would instead diminish activism or you will regain the initiative. Well, that was not the case. Not so.
Wel, ek het geglo
Well, I believed that it served a purpose, and it also served a purpose to a measure to curb Pepco's activities and structures. But what I'm saying is that we didn't kidnap them to interrogate them. We kidnapped them to kill them.
It was at this airport in Port Elizabeth that Norman Fezi, a baggage handler, claims that he saw Hashe, Galela and Godolozi get abducted by policemen in 1985.
That day I said Godolozi to come here and Galela and Hashe. And then they put a long time to waiting inside. I'm standing here that time beside the park. I'm standing watching all that time. You go out, some the police, all together. After that, the following day, I report for the UDF officers. I wanted to know the office, the personal office, because Godolozi and Hashe, the police is taking.
The applicants contradict each other on the purpose of the abduction. The askaris and policemen from Flag Plus, whose applications will be heard this week, will say they were abducting the Pepco Three for the purpose of interrogation. They also say they did not know of the elimination plan.
And do you believe that the murder of the Pepco Three was warranted?
At that stage, yes.
Snyman and Du Plessis were not there when the three were executed. The sequence of the executions was reported by Van Zyl, who says after the abduction, the men were taken to Post Chalmers, a disused police station in Craddock. The next day, May the 9th, they were fed, drugged, shot dead, and their bodies burnt to ashes.
The people were given coffee. There was a sleeping drug in it, which was provided by Captain Van Zyl or Lieutenant Nieuwert. It was put in their coffee and given to them. Shortly thereafter, they fell asleep. And then the people were taken out of the garage one by one, and they were eliminated. Who did the shooting? Captain Van Zyl shot the first person, Lieutenant Nieuwert the second, and I shot the third. Can you remember who was the person whom you killed? I could not remember. I spoke to Lieutenant Nieuwert yesterday, and he gave me an idea of who it could have been. Who do you think it was? I think it was Mr. Hashe. Thereafter, the bodies, what was done with the bodies of the deceased? The wood was placed in a large pile in the backyard. The people were carried to the wood, put on top of it. All three of them, yes. And it was set alight, and diesel was poured over. Is it your recollection that after approximately 6 hours the bodies had been burnt to ash? It could have been a bit longer, it carried on the whole night. Was the ash scraped together after that and placed in black bags? Yes. Is it true that Lieutenant Nieuwert removed these bags with the ashes and reported back to you later that he had thrown the bags in the Fish River? That's correct.
Joe Mamasela, self-confessed political serial killer, was one of the Flag Plus askaris who participated in this operation.
It was brutal. It was what in Afrikaans people call broekskier. It was terrible.
Were they tortured?
They were tortured severely, they were savaged, they were brutalized.
And what was your role in the torture?
My role in the torture was to strangle them and stifle them so that they couldn't make enough noise.
It was, as I said, a very, very unpleasant event in my life, and I would not have been able to put them through unnecessary physical pain.
Hierdie mense was hoë profiel mense.
These
Hulle
people were
was
high-profile
geleerde
people. They were learned
Hulle was
people.
polities aktief.
They were politically
Hulle het
active.
Geen vrees gehad vir die veiligheidsdiens.
And they had
Hulle
no
het dit ook nie
fear
weggesteek.
of the security branch. Neither did they hide it.
En by hoeveel
And
geleenthede het hulle
on
ons gekonfronteer
various
met-
occasions they confronted
Ek
us.
kan nou nie aan spesifieke gevalle
I
dink nie, maar
cannot
indien
recall
iemand hulle sou
specific
mishandel het,
cases, but if
wil
anybody
ek
had
glo
assaulted
dat hulle
them,
dit sou
I
gerapporteer
believe
het,
that they would have
ongeag aan wie daar
reported it.
gekom het.
Lieutenant Nivold beat them up with an iron pipe into their heads so severely that they were kicked, they were punched, they were stomped, or they were jumped over their heads, and they were killed. Yes, they died. They died one by one.
It sounds to me like a totally different incident, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mamasela was not there.
Was he one of the Askaris who were there?
I believe so. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe he was present.
Ek het geen
I had no knowledge or information in that regard.
When you reported that death to Mr. Snyman, you were talking about something that you did not have factual knowledge of because you did not witness it, the death.
That's correct.
That is correct.
I put it to you that the applicants, except Mr. Kule and Mr. Mokhwai, and to a lesser extent, Mr. Bessler, did assault the leaders. And the reason why they are omitting the assault is because they want the killing to seem humane. We applied them with drinks, we talked nicely to them, we gave them sleeping pills and shot them that sleep. You just want to make this killing humane, not brutal as it was.